Number 1.
I work as a teacher in California in the San Gabriel Valley. I teach English as a second language to many young Chinese and Korean students who come from overseas. But there was one day during class where I had to leave early to visit my 55-year-old mother who was at the hospital. She had been diagnosed with cancer and would be undergoing chemotherapy later that day. So I informed my class that a substitute teacher would be standing in for me the rest of the day, and I told them about my mother's condition. Once the sub arrived, I started to gather my belongings and said goodbye to the class. As I was about to exit the classroom, one of my younger students, who I won't name for privacy reasons, went up to me and in a completely emotionless and cold tone said, "Your mom is going to die." I froze up, and I honestly wasn't sure how to respond to that. But I maintained my professionalism and said, "Well, I really hope not," and I walked out of the classroom. I was beyond creeped out by what my student had just said, especially because she was usually very quiet and sweet. So this just seemed random and completely out of character for her. But her facial expression and her tone was disturbing. What makes this all the more eerie was that my mother died about 2 weeks later. I'm still at a loss for words.
Number 2.
Before working at the high school that I do now, I worked as a middle school science and math teacher for 5 years. This story happened my last year teaching at that middle school. It was the first day of school, and like any other teacher, I would start by asking the students to introduce themselves and to tell the class what they did over their summer vacation. The very first student that I called on introduced himself to the class, and then proceeded to tell everyone that he went on a camping trip. Normal enough, right? Well, he then told us that during this camping trip, he drowned his sister in the lake, and his parents had to jump in and save her. We were all shocked and horrified, and one of the students asked the question that was on all of our minds. Why the heck did you drown your sister? Well, because she was bothering me. I don't like to be bothered, he said. I asked the student to sit down, and quickly moved on to the next student. The entire situation was very uncomfortable for myself and the entire class.
Number 3.
I've been teaching for well over 15 years, and every now and then you will encounter a student who prefers to keep to themselves and not interact with other students. Sometimes it's shyness, and other times it could just be social awkwardness, among other things. But there was this one student, that I will call Steven, who was even more reclusive than any other student I've had before. He would never participate in class or talk to the other students, and when I would see him at lunch, he would be sitting alone or just wander the campus aimlessly. I'm someone who really cared about the well-being of my students, and if there was anything wrong, I wanted to do my best to help. Steven came out of his shell later on in the year, after I got to know him through little talks we would have before and after class. Nothing seemed off about him after all. At least, so I thought. There was this one time, when class had just gotten out, and I saw that someone had dropped their notebook on the floor. I bent down to pick it up, and saw that it belonged to Steven, when suddenly a loose page slipped out of the notebook. And what was written on the page shocked me. The page contained a very detailed, graphic, and disturbing rape fantasy that he had written about one of the female students that was in this class. I was completely disgusted, and I contacted his parent and guidance counselor. He ended up switching schools after this, but I really do hope that he got all the help that he definitely needed.
Number 4.
I used to teach web design as well as computer graphics at a community college. I was cleaning up the classroom one afternoon after class had ended, when out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a 64GB flash drive was left in one of the computers. I saw that it was plugged into the computer that my favorite and most talented student used. Now, we had a project due that week, and well, I was really curious to see what he had in store for me. Maybe his project is on this flash drive, I thought. So, as you can imagine, curiosity got the better of me, and I stupidly made the decision to see what was on it. I logged into the computer and clicked on the device. The flash drive didn't have his project on it, but it was filled with candid pictures of some girl who I had never seen before. But you could tell that all of these photos were taken on campus. The USB also contained several screenshots of all her pictures from Instagram and Facebook, as well as screenshots of her tweets from Twitter. But it gets even worse. There was another folder named Hero. I reluctantly decided to open that folder as well, and my jaw dropped. It was filled with anti-Semitic World War II propaganda, and even a Word document titled An Ode to Adolf Hitler. I had enough, and I ended up destroying the USB. The next morning, when my student came in, he was asking if I had found a USB flash drive, and I told him no, and that maybe the janitor had probably thrown it out. I could never look at him the same way after finding all of this shit.
Number 5.
I am an elementary school teacher, and have been for almost 25 years. After being a teacher for nearly 30 years, you see a lot of strange things. But the craziest thing I encountered was during recess, when I saw a group of kids gathering around something near the fence of the school. I was walking over towards their direction, but I wasn't alarmed immediately. But that was until I heard some of the students start to scream. I ran over to where the commotion was coming from, and there, in the middle of the circle, was a first-grade student stabbing a squirrel to death with a pencil while laughing like a maniac. I told him to stop it and to come with me to the principal's office, but he just gave me this weird, creepy smirk. And then he stepped on the squirrel, ultimately killing the poor thing. His parents were embarrassed and disturbed by their child's actions, and they swore to me and the principal that nothing like this had ever happened before. But for some reason, I was pretty positive that this was definitely not his first time doing something horrible like this.
Number 6.
I am a substitute teacher, and I would usually sub for high schools and occasionally middle schools. I guess you could say I'm a relatively attractive guy, but what happened one day while I was subbing was completely creepy and uncalled for. I was subbing for a senior English class, and immediately I noticed this girl, who I will refer to as Lisa, kept staring at me with a lustful gaze. It was really, really awkward, and just downright distracting. To make matters worse, I was subbing for that class for an entire week, while their actual teacher, Mrs. Jefferson, was recovering from surgery. And every single day, like clockwork, Lisa would go out of her way to talk to me and wait outside the classroom a full 30 minutes before class would start, just so she could get a better look at me. So, when Friday came around, you better believe I was happy as hell to get the fuck out of there. I got in my car and started to drive home to my apartment, when I noticed a white Volkswagen Jetta tailing me for the length of my drive home. Of course, I didn't think too much of it at the time, though. I parked my car in my designated spot, and I saw the Jetta slowly drive by, and it was none other than Lisa. I gave off a little courtesy wave, and instead of going straight to my apartment like I usually would, I decided maybe it would be best to just walk around the area so she wouldn't see which apartment number was mine. Maybe she just lives in the same complex, I told myself. But after a while, when I finally didn't see her car anymore, I walked back towards my apartment. And as I went up the stairs, I saw that there was a note on my floor mat. I picked up the note, and it said, "Call me, cutie," followed by her name and phone number. I came to the realization that this wasn't her first time following me home. I mean, how else could she have known which apartment was mine? Thankfully, I never subbed for that class again.